Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of the TIBCO Labs for Developers series. We're very excited to have everyone join us. Thanks for all the people from all over the world that follow us, people from Africa, from Europe, from Asia, a lot of people from US as well. So we're very excited to have this session taking place today. The topic for today is it's a little bit of a long title, is how to customize your customer experiences with open source technologies and scalable APIs. So we're going to be dissecting basically everything that we mean by that. And today I'm joined by Nelson Petracek, Global CTO at TIBCO Software. Good morning, Nelson. And Jordan Schutz from Twilio, Program Manager at Twilio. So putting you right on the spot, Jordan, from the beginning. So if you can just briefly tell us a little bit more about Twilio and what you do for Twilio, and then that way we'll dive into the topic of today.
Totally. Yeah, no, thank you guys so much for having me. It's really awesome to be here. I love your guys' LinkedIn live sessions, so it's awesome to be a part of one. So a little background on me. I got started in tech. I'm a video game developer, so I got started doing that in college, and that's how I was able to, pay my way through school, was by creating games for kids on like Nintendo and PlayStation. I would self-publish, and I was an indie developer. And so growing up in the Bay Area, I grew up in San Jose. So I went to a lot of meetups growing up, and so that's how I met, a lot of people in the developer relations and advocacy space. So that's how I got my first job. And then now I've kind of got into product marketing. So now I'm working at Twilio as a senior product marketing manager for developer experience. So I'm in charge of all of the go-to-market for our developer tooling and basically telling developers what we do as a product, and being able to tell technical stories in a digestible way. So, yeah.
Nice. Excellent. Great. Well, just to keep this interactive, I want to invite everybody on the audience. If you have any specific questions for Nelson, for Jordan, or on the topic, just feel free to start typing them in, and then we'll try to incorporate them as we go along. But as we get into the topic, Jordan, so how does Twilio leverage open source technologies and specifically, to provide better customer experiences across the board?
Yeah, so at Twilio, we've really been working this year to tell a cohesive narrative across our entire platform. So we're really trying to drive home a narrative of the customer engagement platform. You can use Twilio to really engage and personalize customer experiences at scale by merging all of customer data under a single source of truth. So we have channels like messaging, voice, email, and video, where developers, they can create these scalable production-ready applications by just implementing a few basic Twilio APIs. So we make it really simple for developers to get started. But on top of our API offerings and what we offer that's proprietary, we really want to offer developers open source technologies, because we know that that's what developers love. And we know that we want to offer things at scale to developers that might help them create these experiences for their customers. So we recently launched Paste. It's actually an open source UI UX framework for React developers. So if you code in React, it's great. Basically what it allows you to do is it allows you to create accessible experiences, and it has things like screen reader support built in. So if you are hard of hearing or you need help, it's really easy to get started. And so this is an open source project, and it's open to our community of developers. And we also have a game called Twilio Quest. And what's really great about this game is it's open source. And once again, video game, I'm a video game developer. I'm super passionate about this. So it actually allows developers to learn how to code through APIs. And if you're a developer, you can actually customize this video game yourself. You can download the source code, you can add your own levels, and you can use Twilio Quest as an educational tool to, let's say, teach your students in a classroom how to send their very first API request, right? So it basically creates a fun way to consume APIs.
Nice. And that's why I know that you're a huge advocate of APIs and very knowledgeable on this topic specifically. So we talk about integration, scalability, API management. So from a TIBCO point of view, how can TIBCO leverage something like Paste, for example, right? The project that Jordan mentioned, or what Twilio does across the board in general?
Yeah. Yeah,
Go ahead, Jordan. Yep.
Yeah, no. So what's great about Paste is like, since it is open source, if you're built on a React framework, right, it's really easy to implement. You just kind of download the library and you can get it implemented on your website with just a few clicks. I think Tibco is obviously doing a lot in the open source community. So it would also be great to kind of hear from you guys, what you guys have implemented for developers. So.
Yeah, no, and that I mean, you've said many things there that are obviously key to organizations today as they look to develop sort of the next evolution, next generation of application. I think it goes back in a lot of ways to the notion of building blocks. So you start off with these APIs, you start off with these frameworks, you start off with some of these being available as open source. Some of them are commercialized APIs. And what you're really trying to do is allow organizations to quickly and easily assemble new capabilities, whatever those might be, whatever the applications are, whether they're related to the customer experience, personalization, whether it's related to supply chain, transportation, logistics, regardless of the vertical that you're in. The ability to take these building blocks and assemble them quickly in different ways to build a new capability is what a lot of organizations, at least the ones that I talk to for sure, are looking at. And it's not even just about the assembly, but it's also about the disassembly, oddly enough, because what you want to be able to do is you quickly assemble something, you try it out, you add these rich capabilities that these APIs are providing, whether they're provided through open source technologies or third parties, Twilio, and so on. And then you see what works. And if something works, great, build upon it. If not, you can easily then tear it down because you've used this element of composability. And then now you can reassemble these building blocks in a different way to provide a new capability. So I love what Jordan is saying, and gaming was really a great way to approach this originally. Because I mean, there's complete games right now built around the notion of building blocks, right? So, that's the idea. So you're assembling these constructs from these building blocks, and whether you're in the gaming world or in the application space, there's a lot of parallels between those two worlds. So
totally, and just to add to that, like what I've noticed, being a developer and working with a lot of developers at different companies, is that these building blocks or these APIs, they really speed up development in an organization. I mean, you can do things with APIs that you could never do, years ago. And what's great is that you should never build something that's already been built. I'm a huge proponent of this. In video games, I would use templates, I would use code samples to make my game as quickly as possible because I really wanted to ship something to my customers, right? Same at Twilio. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to use all the resources at our disposal to make something awesome. So what I think is great about these building blocks or these APIs is that you can basically spin up a new business really, really quickly. I've seen developers basically take APIs from all these different companies, combine it together into one web experience and create a holistic platform for their customers, really with zero startup costs. And then they're able to scale because they've used these building blocks and these APIs that are already scaled for them out of the box. So they can just focus on monetizing rather than having to focus on the complex backend or the infrastructure, right? That's all stuff that developers really don't want to have to do. They want to focus on the main business use cases. So
that was going to be one of my questions, right? In terms of reusability, in terms of collaboration or external collaboration, right? When you have two organizations that they're trying to share assets, data, or have joint transactions, or any sort of collaboration, right? These building blocks, I mean, they're super critical, right? And then you're just confirming that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about digital transformation? I mean, what's really the role of this sort of building block approach, right? And digital transformation. I mean, is it a must? I mean, when people refer to the term digital transformation, implicitly they are leveraging APIs behind the scenes or not? Or what's the reality?
I would say so. I think digital transformation, right? Especially with COVID, we're all going online and we're all going digital. And I think now more than ever, right, we need ways to create things quickly. And so I think APIs really help you with that digital transformation journey and being able to get something spun up, having it scale, and being able to tell that story to your customer in a meaningful way. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think digital transformation in many ways these days translates also into things like agility, time to market, cost, right? So If anything, the pandemic showed how quickly organizations need to pivot to new business models, whether adapt what it is that they're currently doing. How do they leverage their existing capabilities, but in very different ways? And because people are now consuming their products, services, and a variety of new mechanisms, new channels. So being able to quickly disassemble and reassemble and present applications, new applications, different applications, things that they do in a different way, being able to do that quickly, easily, cheaply is key. And so in order to do that, I mean, there's many things that allow you to do that. Cloud is one. Being able to spin up infrastructure quickly, as Jordan mentioned, is another. But as you go up all these different layers, you're just encountering different sets of APIs. Right? You're encountering APIs when it comes to infrastructure. You're encountering APIs when it comes to networking. You're encountering APIs when it comes to storage. And then you got your business level services and the things, all the things that Twilio does as an example. You just keep going up the stack, and that's you're bringing all that together. And only by enabling or using those capabilities can you enable your organization to transform and pivot as quick as you need it to.
Yeah. So I guess. In my mind, right, like there's two main sort of there's a line, right, that divides what is the API development itself, right, and then the API usage, right? So thinking in those terms, what are some of the latest trends that you are seeing, right? So for example, in usage, right, like I mean, last year we were talking a lot about like composable applications, right, and the concept of tear and replace, or simply just being able to, Jordan, your example, right, like assemble applications quickly with APIs that were developed by even different authors, right? Different companies, right? And then quickly being able to do that, which is amazing, right? So, thinking in those terms and what you're seeing, as trends for this year or next year, right? Like, let's talk first about like API development. What are some of the major sort of like, new ways of thinking, right? In terms of API development.
Yeah. So I can kind of touch on this. I mean, I think we've kind of seen a change over the past, years, but I think APIs generally are, the same. I think, all organizations, they really need APIs to decouple, right, their front end from their back end systems. And I think that APIs have really been the main factor in reducing technical debt in organizations, right? So we're seeing orgs really like adopt API development, and it's become easier, right? We have so many great API management solutions, API gateways. Also, the growth of developer advocacy and relations have made consumption of APIs much better. Technical demos and walkthroughs, it's all super simple now. So even if you don't have a lot of experience as a developer, it's now really easy to consume and create and use APIs. So that's really exciting from my perspective. I just think also there's a reduced barrier of entry for devs, which is exciting. So at Twilio, right, I think it's really our focus that we want to make, the developer successful. That's like one of our main mottos. And so we also want to help you build great things. And so to do that, we need to hire developers, we need to be developers, and we need to talk to developers. And I think our APIs at Twilio, fundamentally, they haven't really changed that much. But what we're really working on is creating services that offer businesses and obviously the customer engagement platform to customers, because businesses, they don't want like one single solution or one single API. They really want a platform that they can, run their entire business off and engage with their customers across APIs. So I'm really seeing API usage being used in every single facet, and it's growing. So that's really the best way I can describe, going more towards a platform narrative rather than just I'm going to consume one single API.
Interesting. What about you, Nelson, from TIBCO's side? As far as API development, what are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, and this is, again, these statements will be across the board. I mean, there's definitely more, I would say, knowledge in terms of where and how APIs can be applied. I would say that APIs are no longer the low-level APIs that we used to deal with in the past. I mean, APIs have always been there. We've always written against APIs, but I think the level of capabilities that they offer and provide, and the ease by which now a lot of them can be consumed. So, to Jordan's point, a lot of it is around consumability. You can have the best APIs in the world, but if you have no documentation and no tutorials and samples and all this, it's just not going to be rapidly adopted. So there's that whole ecosystem that needs to build around the APIs as well to make them completely effective. But generally speaking, you have the increased capabilities that APIs are now offering. So by making an API call, these APIs are providing higher level services than what historically they may have done in the past. The other thing I think that you see is obviously the evolution of technologies for different types of APIs and different consumption models. And by that, I mean, not so much how you pay for them, but how you, the way in which information is delivered through them. So APIs, for example, used to be you make a call, you waited, you got back an answer. Now it's, that pattern still exists, and people will use REST and things like that as interaction styles for those kinds of APIs. But you now also have the notion of async APIs. So now I can just kind of register myself against an API, and I'm going to get information pushed to me. So I don't necessarily have to make this very kind of request response based model or interaction pattern. So the way in which the APIs are being presented has changed. The level of functionality that they're incorporating has changed. And the technologies and interaction patterns and styles that I have to interact with those APIs, I think, has also changed. And again, it just goes back to the point of view that you need to offer all these different kinds of capabilities to fit into how people are looking to build applications for today's, as you mentioned, today's digital transformation strategies, right? So.
Yeah. No, interesting. And, when I know, like if we would talk, for example, I don't know, analytics or AI or ML, right? And I would ask you, what is the hottest trend right now, right? Like something would pop up in your mind, right? So if I could ask you the same question about like API usage or development, what is kind of like the hottest trend that you're seeing? Like something that like really pops in your mind right away? Or is there anything? I mean, it could be that there's really nothing, and then, it's more like the collective sort of like, broader usage, right? And the applicability, right? That is increasing, but just curious.
Yeah, Nielsen, you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. Either way, I was going to see if you wanted to go first. No worries.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. There's going to be a few things. I mean, there's the technology trends, as I mentioned, around how the technology around APIs is evolving, and as Jordan mentioned, a lot of this is being driven by the open source community. We're both big promoters of the open source community. We feel that that's a large way in which APIs and the technology associated with APIs can evolve and advance. So as I mentioned, it's no longer just about REST. It's about GraphQL, right? As a new way of putting together or assembling these APIs in a way that's much easier for developers to use, consume, more performant, and so on and so forth. Async APIs would be another example. I mean, it's not all about request response and synchronous interactions and things like that. So you'll see the continued evolution, specifications, standardization, things like that around just making it easier for organizations to expose APIs and subsequently for consumers to actually go ahead and use these APIs. Mm-hmm. From a architectural standpoint, we keep going up the stack. So as I mentioned, it started out with APIs around infrastructure, and you just kind of keep going up, and it's business services, and now it's broader composite or composite, depending on where you live, type of services. That you're seeing this continued evolution of these APIs evolving, going up the stack, offering different capabilities, and then enabling this composable applications, or as Gartner will say, packaged business capabilities, or analysts have different terms for it. But at that point now, it's more what they enable and more what they provide. So evolution on the technology side for sure, and we'll continue to see that. Standardization, specifications, things like that, going to see that as well. And some of that will become vertical specific. And then also in terms of what they enable, which is primarily the element of composability, at least the way organizations use it today. So those are the three that I'll just pick. So
those are great. And I just have to also add that, when it comes to APIs, I think, there's always going to be developers that are going to have their preferences, right? Devs are always going to want to use one language, or there's going to be this new hot thing that everyone jumps on, right? I think at the end of the day, what devs really care about is what's the business use case and what's the problem that we're trying to solve. And being able to tell that story in a technical story in a non-technical way, I think is really important. And I think that that's part of what I do as like a product marketing manager, and why we really need the entire org to agree on like what's the actual problem that we're solving and provide that use case to the customer. So a lot of the work that I do on a day-to-day is, telling those stories. Like we host a thing on twilio.com/releases where we highlight all the new product updates. So that way we can tell developers like, this is what we're doing. Creating really good web experiences like live demos and YouTube videos that explain, what these APIs can do for your business and how easy it is to get set up, right? all those things really make consuming and choosing a language not really that relevant, because at the end of the day, you're using that product to solve a problem. And so I think that's like really important. So I try not to get like caught up on like what's the newest hot thing, but I just try to get focused on what am I trying to solve and how can I do it as quickly as possible so I can focus on innovating rather than just trying to reinvent the wheel, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. And Jesus, if you really want to add some fun into the mix as well, you can start to look now at the notion of Web3, the Web3 APIs, and a much more decentralized architecture when it comes to APIs, and how do you deliver APIs in that form factor? So, but that's probably a topic for another day. But it's also a space that we're watching, because there's some very interesting initiatives going on in that arena. And some related technologies as well. So yeah, just as another area for our listeners to check out, that would be another area that I think has got some interesting aspects to it.
Yeah, no, definitely sounds like a great topic for a future episode. So as we wrap up here, I have one last question, and then how about like go through a couple of announcements, and then that way you have like 30 seconds or so to think about the answer. I'm gonna kind of put you here on the spot, but just curious, like if there's in your mind any example of a public application, like publicly available application, that you feel is a great example of everything that we've been talking about, right? Something that, I don't know, you've seen lately, or you know about it, and it could be a great reference point for people here in the audience. So think about it for 30 seconds. I'll just do a couple of commercials very quickly. So the first one is to invite everybody to join us. I mean, if you're into open source, or you want to learn more about open source, or API development, API usage, API management, how these two topics overlap and why not, we have what we call Open Source Day event that is going to happen on May 12th. So the URL is there on the screen. You can sign up today. We're going to be running this event in a hybrid mode. So it's there's a live component that is going to take place in Austin, Texas, on May 12th. But if you're not in Austin, or even if you are, but you want to attend remotely, you can just sign up for the event on the URL that it's on the screen there. Great lineup of speakers and sessions, highly recommendable. The second one is another event, the next episode of this Tip Collabs for Developers series that is going to take place on March 23rd. So stay tuned for that one. We're going to have Microsoft as the guest speaker. Really looking forward to that one as well. So with that, let me go back to Jordan and Son, and to wrap up this. Anything pop up in your mind, or?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm gonna once again plug Twilio Quest. So I love it. If you're a developer and you want to have your first experience, sending an SMS message through a video game, check out the Twilio Quest video game. You can download it on like your PC or Mac and try it out yourself. What's also really exciting is that on March 23rd, we're actually hosting a Twilio Quest party at a local club in San Francisco called DNA Lounge, and we're basically having the COO from Sledgehammer Games come in, someone from Microsoft Mixed Reality, and then we're talking about Twilio Quest as well. So we're renting out the venue. It's going to be for the Game Developer Conference. So we're hosting a Game Developer Conference event. We already have almost 300 RSVPs. So if you want to come through, show your support, and meet fellow Twilions and learn about APIs and game development, definitely come through.
Nice. Thank you.
So Jesus, I could not pick one, because if you look at the way that from our perspective, a lot of the APIs and the systems that people build from a combination of TIBCO, Twilio, as well as open source, there's hundreds of these kinds of applications that are out there. And I think most people that if you've ever shipped a package, if you've ever taken a flight, if you've ever done any sort of financial transaction, you're using APIs, and you're using them that are probably powered in some respect by our organizations and so on. So I was actually hard pressed to pick one that's extremely cool. Jordan's got the best one when it comes to combining APIs and games and things like that. So we're going to go with that one.
Okay, excellent. No, I think it was a great example. Thank you for that, Jordan, and thank you for being here today, joining us. And with that, we're going to wrap up this session today. Thank you for your time, and everybody that joined us. Looking forward to the next episode on March 23rd. See you soon then.
Appreciate it. Thanks all.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.